My name is Angelina Cruz. I am currently a 6th grade teacher at Mitchell Middle School. I'll be teaching 7th grade next year. And I am the president-elect for the Racine Education Association. So back then I was discussing the impact of Act 10,
Right.
And potentially what it could do. And I think, like, in retrospect, Act 10 was really sort of this Trojan horse for a larger agenda to destroy public schools. And so what we're seeing now is sort of this corporate reform agenda infiltrating all of our public schools. So the emphasis is on standardized testing. Standardized testing is it's a false measure of the growth that our kids are experiencing. So, but we've seen this testing infiltrate our schools down to the lowest levels of, so we're talking about 4-year-old kindergartners being tested for hours upon hours, and it's developmentally inappropriate. We know that. There's this definite shift to more of running school districts like businesses, treating kids like widgets.
Right.
And it's demoralizing for teachers because we know it's not best practice. It's demoralizing for children. So the morale, I think, both from teachers and students is in the 12 years that I've been teaching, it's at an all-time low. And at this point, we are vying with voucher schools for resources. Voucher schools are on an uptick, and I think as more people understand that that's public money that is being used, and it's completely unaccountable, and people are upset by it, but we're in a position where we have to educate the public on that.
It's sort of done under the name of reform.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was perusing Diane Ravitch's blog, and I just came across this about it. Here's what she said. I'll let you react to this.
Okay.
Reform seldom refers to reform. Reform means privatization. Reform means assaults on the teaching profession. Reform means eliminating teachers' unions, which fight for better salaries and working conditions. Reform means boasting about test scores by schools that have carefully excluded the students who might get low scores. Reform means stripping teachers of due process rights or any other job security. Reform means schools should operate for profit, and that private corporations should be encouraged to profit from school spending. Reform means acceptance of privately managed schools that operate without accountability or transparency. Reform means incremental destruction of public education.
Yes, to all of it. So it's being public school teachers and union activists. We have a tremendous responsibility. I mean, we're talking about saving public education, right? We know that there's there's an agenda to destroy. It's to privatize it and to monetize it, because it was the last truly public institution left in the United States that everybody had access to. And frankly, I think, that bigger picture, that's a threat to being a free and democratic society. And there's this great irony in Diane Ravitch being, she's one of the staunchest supporters of teacher unions now, and advocating for public schools and anti-testing. She started the Network for Public Education. She has shifted so tremendously in her viewpoint, but to look at where she started as a Secretary of Education with Bush and where she is now, she knows exactly what the intent was, that it failed, and that it should stop. It makes me believe that she's a human being that is just trying to do the right thing. She alluded to schools that use test scores and are willing to get rid of children that are going to skew the results. And we know that's absolutely what they do, right? We have third Friday counts. So the kids that are being rejected by these voucher schools or private schools or whatnot, those schools get to set their own rules, and when they get kicked out, we educate everybody. We don't discriminate. We take everybody in to educate them, and most often it's kids with special needs. Parents don't know that these schools are not legally obligated to serve their children. We as a public institution are legally obligated to serve their children. So, and that also impacts our funding, right? So if they're counted at these voucher schools or private schools that are accepting vouchers, and the game is you keep them till the third Friday count, you get the money that follows that student, and then you kick them out. So you have the money, but the money doesn't follow the student to the public schools. So it's like a shell game, in a really sad shell game, because it impacts children who are the most vulnerable in our society. So the game is being rigged against kids who are already at a disadvantage in terms of where they come from economically and socially. It's this tremendous shift from teaching the whole child, addressing their socio-emotional needs, to looking at them as a number. Children are being dehumanized, and for me, as somebody that has devoted my life to working with them, it's just it's very disheartening. But it's also the reason that I'm a union activist, because people like to paint us as, there go the teachers again. But what we're fighting for is for our children. Whatever impacts us as public school teachers impacts the children that attend public schools. And we truly are. I mean, that was part of Act 10. That was part of the game. I think people recognize that in positions of power. We were sort of, public unions were sort of the last, we're the last line of defense in protecting public schools and protecting our kids. So that was an effort to eliminate us as a barrier. Our society has seemingly become very anti-intellectual. And I think that's another thing that frightens me with this shift to standardized testing. We're losing the ability to really focus on fostering critical thinking skills.
So the things you said back in 2012 about feeling dismissed or disrespected, does that still hold?
In my day-to-day relationships with parents in the school, I don't feel that way. If it's personal, you can relate them to somebody, that teacher's great. But if you talk about teachers as a group, people will be like, they're the problem. Our profession is being deprofessionalized. Somehow, teaching has become a profession that people are sort of like, well, like we don't deserve what other professions receive. So it's kind of a bizarre spot to be in. I don't know. We shouldn't get raises. We have Cadillac benefits, and I don't think people realize. So in Racine, we have educational assistants that are working at poverty level wages. The other thing that's sort of really mind-blowing to me is it seems that people have separated teachers from being a part of the community. So we're talking, when we talk about the educational assistants that are living at poverty level wages, that's a member of our community with children that go to our schools. The way that we're treated impacts the economy of the community as a whole. So it's sort of, you know, we all do better when we all do better type of thing. But it's hard for me to understand how you treat your workers so poorly. Ones that have devoted their lives to children and education. We know that businesses look for communities with good, strong public schools.
Right.
It doesn't make sense at all.
So, would you encourage anyone now to become a teacher?
I don't know the answer to that. Okay, so it's kind of a joke with teachers, right? Like, we do talk about this, and when we hear, like, our students just going to school to become a teacher, you're sort of conflicted by it because, wow, you know, obviously teachers impacted this child's life. It feels good to be part of that. But on the other hand, you just want to say, you know what, it's one of the hardest jobs on the face of the earth. And I don't think it's just a unique Wisconsin problem. I think this is nationwide. Being a public school teacher, it's very difficult. You have to have a lot of fight in you, I think, because it's not just showing up to your classroom every day and lugging a giant bag of papers home to correct, and which in and of itself is an extraordinarily large amount of work to ask anybody to do, but it's also being very politically conscious. And at this point in time, and there are teachers that still sort of like, I don't want to deal with the politics of this job, but in order to survive as public schools, I think teachers, all of us, need to be very politically conscious. We need to watch what's happening with our school boards, what's happening with our state reps, what's happening with our governors, because that's all part of a picture that very directly impacts our ability to do our job. So yes, I would encourage it, but with that caveat, if you're not prepared to deal with all of these other things, then it's probably not something that you're going to enjoy as much as you think you're going to enjoy it. So working with the kids, it's the most rewarding job on the face of the earth. It's sort of all of the ugly stuff outside of the classroom that really weighs down on people now. So yes and no.